What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pennell here. We're going my final thoughts for week 4 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. We'll be breaking down the entire slate, talking cash games, talking stacks for tournaments. I'll try to build a lineup as we talk through it, just going over roster construction and the process that I would use for building a single entry type lineup. And then at the end, I'm going to optimizer to see who's populating the most as of right now. And if you're new here, there's no such thing as hot takes or gut feelings. They don't exist. We just look at the data, try to interpret it for what makes sense for week 4 in fantasy football. And then we try to build off of that. If that sounds good to you, do me a favor, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Let's dive right in. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. And I think it's a pretty fun slate this week, but also fair warning, there is so many injuries this weekend. And I tried to wait out recording as long as I could on Friday, so there could be more potential injuries that come out after I'm done recording this. But to get the big news out of the way, Trey McBride, Devontae Adams, George Kittle is in, Deebo Samuel is questionable, Chris Olave just got hit with a hamstring injury. Like, there is so many moving pieces right now that I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I'll try to talk about it as we go through it, but there is some question marks that are up in the air that we're probably not going to know until Sunday morning or afternoon, depending on when the game starts. So just to get cash games out of the way, in my first look video, I said I don't really see any reason not to go with either Jaden Daniels or Kyler Murray in that high scoring, at least projected high scoring game with the 50-point over under, 3.5 point spread over in Arizona. And that has not changed for me. They're my two highest predicted own quarterbacks right now. I believe I have Kyler Murray roughly around 20%, Jaden Daniels at around 17% as far as ownership projections. They both have legs. They can get the job done just solely what they can do on the ground, but then anything else through the air is going to be an added benefit. And as far as tournaments are concerned, you can still play them in tournaments. They do have pass catching options with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, no Trey McBride is going to hurt him a bit, but I still think you can do a nice single stack with him and Marvin Harrison. There's also other options like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch that are viable. Jaden Daniels, Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin. But if you're playing cash games, those are the two that I would go with. They're my two highest projected quarterbacks besides even ownership. I just top 2 and everything. I think everyone else will probably have the same conclusion for that. For some reason, if you really need to save money, I think Justin Fields is also a fine consolation prize, decent spot versus the Indianapolis Colts, and he too can use his legs, which is really what I care about when it comes to cash games, but really try to stay with either Jaden Daniels or Kyler Murray. I will say on FanDuel, it's kind of tough to get there with Kyler at nearly $9,000, but not so much over on DraftKings. Now, if we are talking tournaments, that leaves us with CJ Stroud, Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy. All I think are fine options just because I like some of the stacking options with them. Really, none of these guys are going to get the job done by themselves on the ground. So we are going to have to find some guys to pair with them to try to get those ceiling performances over in tournaments. Just try to make this more simple when we talk about these quarterbacks because, like I said, we are pretty much stacking with them if we are playing the other guys. And just, I have the stack page up here. If you guys ever do want access to my entire NFL model, you can get access to it in the link down below in the description or the pinned comment. Get all the projections on there, the optimizer ownership, all that fun stuff. It's on there. Just do sins for the entire slate, then have all the players projected out if that is your thing. If not, that's fine. Just ignore what I said. But I do think this info is pretty helpful, and it's how I use it to digest the information in an easy fashion on Sundays or showdown slates. So up top, I just have this sorted by DraftKings salary. So we do have the 49ers offense, which does have a couple of question marks. Although I think 2 minutes ago, they just said George Kittle is not on the injury report. So he's going to be good to go, which is obviously a bump for Brock Purdy, getting one of the best tight ends in football back in the field and just overall for the offense. And Deebo Samuel has been back at practice the previous 2 days. He is listed as questionable, but it sounds like he is trending towards playing. And if that's going to be the case, I know it's a really ugly game versus the New England Patriots. 40.5 over under, but they still have a 25.5 team total. They got to get there somehow. I know they're pretty decent favorites, but I am fine with the stack overall because it's not overly expensive on FanDuel. Kind of tough for over $7,000, but over on DraftKings, an average salary of $5,600 isn't going to completely break the bank. And as you can see, I have it sorted by the full team here, just quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, just to try to help break it down even more. But I have Purdy. $6,100. You can easily pair him with a guy like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, or even Juwan Jennings. If Deebo Samuel is out, obviously big bumps for guys like Brandon Ayuk and Jennings. But with Kittle back, just know it's not the same situation as it was last week if Deebo does happen to be out, because you'd have to assume that Kittle's probably going to garner roughly 25-ish% target share. And when you take him out of the offense, it's just massive opening, especially when Deebo is out. But if they're all going to be back in, you will certainly have to bump down the more complementary pieces. So moving down to Houston, I really like the spot here just because the offense has gotten more concentrated this weekend with the loss of Tank Dell on the offense. So we know when CJ Stroud's dropping back, most likely the ball is going towards Nico Collins, who was also banged up a bit this weekend, but he's going to be good to go, and Stephon Diggs. Also, Dalton Schultz can be in the mix, and with Tank Dell being out, he could get a slight bump in target share this weekend, but I don't think it's going to be anything extreme, but you can't rule him out completely. But this is definitely one of the better quarterback wide receiver stacks of the week. Josh Allen just got done absolutely decimating this defense on Monday Night Football. Like, they made Jacksonville look extremely bad. I don't think Houston's as good as Buffalo, but the offense can certainly be right up there with just about anybody in the league. 26-point implied team total for the Texans here. And as you can see, their stack ratings do look pretty good. Joe Mixon looks like he'll be back this weekend potentially. But quarterback wide receiver wise, of the stacks that I'm looking at, I do have all the other teams stacked up, but of these stacks, we do have the highest quarterback wide receiver stack rating, even with Tank Dell being out here. So Nico Collins, someone that I think is going to be extremely popular this weekend. I think the wide receiver is going to be very popular, but I don't think CJ Stroud's ownership is going to be anything crazy. So that's just one way to get different in tournaments while still playing chalkier pieces. Then we have the Bengals, who I do like quite a bit this week. I do have Joe Burrow projecting to be the third highest owned quarterback this weekend, but there is a big tier drop off from the top two that we talked about. So even if you do want to play Joe Burrow, and I think he'll be one of the higher owned quarterbacks, I still think the ownership's not going to be high enough to where it's going to really be something to be too concerned about. Because just getting away from Daniels and Kyler Murray, especially in like single entries, that'll keep you different. And there is clear-cut stacking options with Joe Burrow, because Burrow's a statue. He's not going to get there based off of 60 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns like the two he have talked about can do it. He's similar to CJ Stroud, where CJ Stroud's having a great game. That means his pass catching options are having great games. And I like pretty much all of the pass catchers with Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase is obviously public enemy number 1, but T. Higgins, Yoshi Voss, who's been very good so far this year. And then we also have Mike Gesicki, who I think is one of the better value tight ends of this week's slate. So I think the Bengals make sense quite a bit here. And with Andy Dalton under center for the Carolina Panthers, a guy like Deontay Johnson would be an excellent run back option. Tampa Bay, so I do like them just kind of in one spot specifically, and it's pretty much his quarterback, wide receiver. Don't really have interest in Baker Mayfield, Kate Otten stacks. I don't really love the run game, but specifically Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. I think they're some of the best tournament plays on the slate. Godwin is someone you can play in cash games if you're trying to get different in GPPs. I think Mike Evans probably makes the most sense there, but this is a spot where the passing attack can succeed versus that Eagles defense. And we've pretty much talked all we can about Arizona and Washington. I want to just keep beating the drum here, but those are going to be the two most popular quarterbacks. And with that being the case, people are going to want to play some pass catchers with them. So you're going to see guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, and then I think Elijah, that's his name, Elijah Higgins, the new tight end now, tight end 1, I should say, or Kyler Murray, which we know the Cardinals will use a tight end. I'm not saying he's even close to being as good as Trey McBride, but he's certainly going to be thrust into a new role where he will have fantasy relevance. All right, so since we got quarterbacks and kind of the stacks out of the way, let's pick a quarterback to rock with this lineup. And as I always say, guys, I am building this on the fly just to use some players we talked about, and then we'll try to use the roster construction that I like to use, the process, for building a single entry type build. And for the record, Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, my 2 favorite plays at quarterback, but I already did an early look video with them in it. So we're going to go different, and we're going to rock with Joe Burrow here at $6,600, and we'll move on to running backs. All right, moving over to running backs. There's actually quite a few that I like this week, and I'll be honest, there's like 5 guys that feel like the same play up top. They're all elite. They all project extremely well for me, all going to get a ton of volume. And that's pretty much Kyron, Bijan, Kamara, Breece Hall, and Saquon Barkley. I would say they're all in tier 1 for me. Now, I do want to mention that Saquon does have the lead on everybody, but man, that FanDuel price tag is tough. You nearly have to pay $10,000. So if you're going to play Saquon this week, I'm not saying you can't play him on FanDuel, but a lot easier to do on DraftKings. $1,700 more expensive than Breece Hall on FanDuel, but only $200 on DraftKings. And when the projections within like a point of each other, I mean, yeah, if you're on FanDuel, play Breece Hall over Saquon. If you're on DraftKings, I prefer Saquon over Breece Hall, but they are the top 2 options. For me, Saquon is just going to get thrust into a role where he's going to have to do pretty much everything on offense, just because A.J. Brown is very questionable for this game. Devontae Smith's going to be out. Every other wide receiver is out. Jahan Dotson could potentially be the wide receiver 1 in that offense if we're not counting Dallas Goedert. So Saquon, he's just got so much volume this year. I don't see why that's going to change here versus Tampa. They've given it up versus running backs so far this year, and Barkley has been incredible in this offense. Love Breece Hall. You're not going with Saquon. He's my second favorite running back on the slate. But over on FanDuel, play him on FanDuel, 8,000 bucks. That is just very cheap. He's 8-point favorite at home. No reason not to like Breece Hall on the slate. Alvin Kamara is questionable to play versus Atlanta. I'm assuming he's going to be good to go if he's out. I mean, that obviously creates even more of a frenzy in the injury department, but let's just hope he ends up playing. But again, these are just all high volume backs and their offenses that are extremely talented, get goal line work, and just they check all the boxes. Bijan, you can't go wrong. Bijan, just similar to everybody else we talked about. And Kyron Williams, I know the Rams are a bit of a mess right now, but he's only $73. He's been a touchdown scoring machine so far this year. I know it's a very small sample size, but it's just been nothing new from since last season where he's getting all the volume in this backfield. And the Bears, I know it's very early on in the year, but they are 25th versus running backs so far. The only concern I have is that this is not an exciting offense right now. I don't think it's going to be an exciting game. You only have an 18.5 implied team total here, but I think the offense will flow through Kyron Williams. And if you're going to give me that $7,300, I don't see a reason not to at least take some stabs at it. Then after that, we get into the cheaper running backs. Once again, Jordan Mason is mispriced. I know he didn't go off last week, but you just can't expect everyone to go off every single week, even if they're in a good spot. That's just how life and DFS works. Things will fluctuate, but from a median standpoint, looking at all the data, you would expect Jordan Mason to have a fairly good projection this week, which I do. I have in the top 5 or at least top 6. And that price point is $6,700. I don't know what DraftKings is doing. They just refuse to price him up. He should be right around where Bijan, Kamara, Breece Hall are. There's no reason not to as the RB1 in this offense that has shown multiple times he can succeed in the spot. And all the other outside factors would indicate to wanting to play Jordan Mason. 25.5 implied team total for the Niners, which is one of the higher ones on the slate. They're 10.5 point favorites at home. I mean, just everything points to wanting to play Jordan Mason in this game. Now on FanDuel at $9,000, that is really tough to get to. It's easier than Saquon Barkley at $9,700, but on DraftKings, I just don't know what they're doing. The pricing's been pretty flat this year overall. On FanDuel, it seems to be a bit more dynamic. James Conner, Brian Robinson in the same game. If I had to pick, I slightly prefer Brian Robinson. Arizona's run defense has not been good since last season. No Austin Eckler this week as well, so just a bit of a bump for Brian Robinson. One of the better point per dollar options at the running back position, at least in my projections. On Friday, things will change by the time Sunday rolls around, but I don't see a reason not to like Brian Robinson. Now, the issue is a lot of people are going to play Jaden Daniels, and they're probably not going to want to pair him with Brian Robinson. So in your non-Jaden Daniel lineups, I think it makes some sense to get exposure to Robinson because someone's going to have to score in that offense. And if you are fading Daniels, you're assuming he's not going off, and that could mean a Brian Robinson game. James Conner, he's a boring play. He gets volume. Decent spot versus Washington, obviously. I mean, I have nothing bad to say. He's just a boring play. But boring plays aren't the worst things in the world at the running back position. Then if you need some value, sub 6K, Chuba Hubbard and Najee Harris. No Jalen Warren. There's obvious reasons to like Najee. Now, he's not efficient, and I cannot wait to watch him run in the back of his lineman 20 times in a row. But at $5,600, if he just falls into the end zone somehow, I mean, that's fine. And Chuba Hubbard, Cincinnati's defense has not been something to be concerned about so far through the first 3 weeks. And he's going to get a lot of volume, and this offense looked a lot better with Andy Dalton, so it just presents more opportunity. All right, let's fill in the running backs here. Since I am playing Joe Burrow, I am most likely going to be playing Jamar Chase, and he is, nearly $8,000? Yeah, $7,700. So I know I'm going to have to save some money at the running back position. I can't just blindly throw in Breece Hall and Saquon Barkley because they're my favorite plays at the running back position. We got to save some money here. So let's take a little scroll on down here. I want to play Jordan Mason. He's $6,700. It's still kind of expensive. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to afford it. We'll plug him in for now. We will try, but no promises. You might have to take him out later on. And since I mentioned where I don't have Jaden Daniels in this lineup, so I'm probably not stacking that game up just for this specific build. I think they're going to score points, so we can just play a cheap Brian Robinson here at $6,100, and we'll get our exposure through that. And yes, I know there's a lot of options here at wide receiver, but just trying to make it simple. If you are playing tournaments and you don't have a completely mobile quarterback like me right now, I have Joe Burrow. I need to find some of his pass catchers. So it's honestly a lot of it's correlation based. I mean, Jamar Chase would be the top option for my lineup. Love him this week. He had a great game versus Washington. It's nice to see that get back on track. And I don't think he's going to do exactly that versus Carolina. But since I have Joe Burrow, I'm kind of married to Jamar Chase here. Then we also have options like T. Higgins and Yoshi Boz. Marvin Harrison if you're playing Kyler. Nico Collins. Stephon Diggs if you're playing C.J. Stroud. But just to try to get the cash game thoughts out of the way here at the wide receiver position, because you can't correlate your entire lineup. If you are playing cash games, you don't have to stack either way. So for me, like 7K up for cash games. I love Rashee Rice. I love Nico Collins. They project the best for me. I know we haven't really talked about the Chiefs much, but Rashee Rice, this offense flows through him right now. It's not been Travis Kelce. Isaiah Pacheco is out. Rashee Rice is basically the man. I love him at $7,300, and I love Nico Collins with Hank Dell out. They project extremely well for me this weekend. And if you're going at mid-range, Stephon Diggs, for all the reasons why I said I like Nico Collins. Chris Godwin's been a model of consistency so far this year. And then also like Deontay Johnson there. I am a little concerned about him picking up a bit of an injury throughout the week, but it sounds like they've been downplaying it a bit. And my projections like him a lot. And with Andy Dalton at quarterback, that definitely bumps it up. Plus no Adam Thielen this week. So I love Deontay Johnson at that price point. And then if you have to spend down, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker get big boosts with Devontae Adams being out this week. Just naturally the targets have to go somewhere, and they can't all go to Brock Bowers. Darnell Mooney, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, these are all stacking options. Darnell Mooney, not so much, but for the price point, he was one of the better point per dollar options at wide receiver. And then we're going to keep an eye on the status for Deebo Samuel. If Deebo is in, it makes it harder to know exactly who to stack with Brock Purdy because it muddies the waters a bit. I do think Deebo is obviously the best option at $7,000, but that does come with the price point. But if Deebo happens to be out, we know George Kittle is in, I believe. So Brandon Ayuk, Quan Jennings would still get bumps, but not as much as they did in the week prior. All right, let's go over to our lineup here. And since I have Joe Burrow, we're married to Jamar Chase pretty much, so let's play Chase. And then since I like this game overall, it has one of the better over-unders of the entire week. Let's do the run back with Deontay Johnson. I mean, if something more serious pops up before Sunday with the injury status, obviously that's something to monitor. But at $5,600 right now, assuming he is good to go, I like that quite a bit. Then tight ends, I honestly don't care who you play. It's just a dumpster fire this season. If you're going down low, I think there's an obvious option with Elijah Higgins. With no Trey McBride, he's just going to get thrust into the tight end one role here. And while I would not expect the same production as Trey McBride, obviously the projection's not going to reflect the same. He's still a decent value play at $31. We obviously love everybody in this game. They have the highest implied team total of the week. Kyler Murray uses the tight end position. Cardinals use the tight end position. I mean, it's Washington. Yeah, I'll play Elijah Higgins, probably your cash game tight end this week. Early run, again, ownership changes a lot by the time Sunday kickoff happens, but he's currently the highest predicted own for me right now. It could change though. I like Mike Gesicki, which he makes sense for the build we have with Joe Burrow, Tommy Tremble. I mean, it's gross, but he's $2,700 and he should get 3+ targets, and that's all we're asking for. Zach Ertz in that same game environment. And then if you have the money, I don't really think I'm going to have the money in a lot of builds this week, but if I do, Brock Bowers, no Devontae Adams, he's the tight end one. If AJ Brown is out though, I'm pretty sure my projections will have Dallas Goedert as the tight end one this week, just because AJ Brown and Devontae Smith out are a little bit better than having just Devontae Adams out in that Raiders offense. So I have to keep an eye on AJ Brown news, but it's either going to be Dallas Goedert or Brock Bowers, tight end one for me this week. And then George Kittle with his return, we will see if Deebo plays. If Deebo does not play, a bump for George Kittle. If Deebo does play, a bump down for Kittle. All right, back to the build here. Let's finish this off. I just want to plug in a cheap defense to see what kind of actual money we have to work with, because as of right now, we have just over $4,300, but this should open it up a little bit. I don't really like any of the absolute bottom defenses. I do think the Falcons are pretty interesting at home versus the Saints. Obviously, their offense was not going to put up 50 points every single week. They regressed last week versus the Eagles. Are they going to be that bad going forward? I don't know, but I do know that Olave is banged up, and if he happens to miss, that is a bump. Also, Alvin Kamara is questionable. I'm assuming he plays, but I mean, you never know. So Falcons defense, plug it in, $2,600. Let's try to figure the rest of this out. So just under $5,000. Tight end, we can save some money here. Let's just double stack with Joe Burrow. I mean, there's other really good options. And by really good, I mean viable, I should say. But Gesicki here at $3,500. That leaves us $5,600 left. And a couple ways we could go. We could go more balanced, where if you wanted to play a third running back, we have Najee Harris, Chuba Hubbard down there. I don't really feel like playing two Panthers, but if you wanted to go the running back route, you could. Then at wide receiver, you have 56, which does put you in a pretty good range, actually. You have guys like Jacoby Myers, who I like quite a bit now with no Devontae Adams. If Chris Olave is out, Shaheed, if Deebo's out, you have Quan Jennings. I'll be honest, I don't really love Najee that much. If you wanted to go really cheap, you could play Trey Tucker at $3,600, and that would leave you with 76, which really opens the door for some really good plays like Mara, if he happened to be good to go, Marvin Harrison, Bijan Robinson, Kyron Williams, Rashee Rice. So that's one way to go if you really wanted to open it up for the flex spot, but I'll leave it to your imagination. There's plenty of good plays down there, but the basis of this lineup I think looks pretty good. So we have Joe Burrow paired with Jamar Chase and Mike Gesicki. We're running back with Deontay Johnson. We have Mason and Brian Robinson at running back, Falcons defense, and then obviously wide receiver flex. You're in a decent range at $5,600, and there's a couple ways you can go. All right, like I mentioned earlier, just running the optimizer quick just to see which players are populating the most. I am just going to put a little bit of randomness on the projections so they're not the exact ones. I did remove the ownership projections. We're going to move tight end out of the flex spot for this specific build. Let's go to position stacks here. And this is very bare bones. We're just raw dogging it, guys. We're not playing with exposures, nothing like that. Just some very basic settings. I'm not going to force a running back. And while I wouldn't normally force a stacking option with a guy like Jaden Daniels or Kyler Murray, it's just going to have to be how it is in this one. And we can't complain about it. All right, let me make sure those rules stayed. You're good to go. It's okay. And we'll build quick 20. All right, so we got a quick 20 to run. Like I said, no, just real some basic settings here. So let's see what players pop the most. Elijah Higgins, Trey Tucker, I mean, 2 extreme value plays. And when there is a ton of really good 7K plays, it makes sense that they're getting jammed in because I'm going to assume that Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, which they're right below them, are getting jammed in. A lot of Breece Hall, Jamar Chase. So it's going for that type of roster construction. It has to find some value plays, and obviously those are going to be 2 guys that will get populated quite a bit. Falcons defense ended up being pretty popular. Jordan Mason, Najee Harris, George Pickens, but we didn't really talk about him. Deontay Johnson, not as popular as I thought, so I guess with the addition of Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker, probably getting bumped up in projections. He just isn't going to be needed as much as he was earlier in the week when we didn't have those really cheap value plays at wide receivers. So yeah, it makes sense to me. And just to make sure these builds are following the rules here. So if we look at the Kyler Murray builds, should have at least 1 pass catcher with them, which, I mean, yeah, Elijah Higgins is in every single lineup here. So obviously, if you are building a real 20 max or a real 150 max, you got to play around with your exposures because you probably don't want to roll into the slate with 100% Elijah Higgins. Because if we did reduce that, we'll probably see ended up more of like Marvin Harrison Jr. popping up. Because as you can see, we don't have like any Marvin Harrison like at all. So if you wanted that to happen, obviously you'd have to lower your exposure because it's going to try to jam in Kyler Murray. And if it's jamming in Kyler Murray, based on the constraints that we have for this specific example, it would have to find a pass catcher. And unless it's using Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch, it'd probably start populating Harrison a lot more, which is obviously the nuts matchup versus Washington. And looking at the teams that are populating the most, yeah, Arizona up top. I don't think it's anyone's surprise at the highest total. And they have some value plays. Houston, Vegas, with probably a lot of Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers over there. KC, I'm going to assume, is mainly Rice. But yeah, all games, teams, pretty much everyone's going to be on this week. So that's more than likely where the field's going to be going. With that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, or even if you didn't, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'm more than happy to answer them. I wish you the best, and I'll see you all next time.